The idea behind it is if you put like Cody.harms plus Panera, then if you ever start getting spam email to the email address Cody.harms plus Panera, you know that it was Panera that leaked that information to you or whatever. Oh shit. I just turned down the volume on my phone, which probably popped up on the screen recording.
Yep.
Do you know, does the screen recording go off the volume on your phone?
I've been always trying to figure that out. I don't think so. I think it just records it no matter how high or how low you play it.
Well, we'll find out. It's pretty low right now. Cool.
Well, good luck, sir. Good luck with the recording.
Hey, it's on Do Not Disturb. I did get one text message that vibrated, but nothing ever popped up, so.
Nice.
I'll run with it.
Woo woo.
All right, buddy. I will catch you sometime later on today.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Take it easy.
See ya. How do I continue watching?
The James Webb Telescope detected a possible sign of life on this very far away planet, K2-18b. Here's the real talk on what's happening and why scientists are hesitantly excited about this. Okay, so the James Webb Telescope can detect what kinds of light pass through faraway planets' atmospheres, and then we can see what part of the light spectrum gets blocked, indicating that it is absorbed by a certain chemical. Scientists think this time it may have detected dimethyl sulfide, or DMS, which here on Earth is only produced by living things, like phytoplankton in our oceans. The telescope also seems to have found methane and CO2 in the planet's atmosphere, meaning that the planet could have a liquid water ocean. But these are tentative results. We need more data to confirm. It would obviously be huge and very exciting if we confirm these signs of life. But it's already exciting that the James Webb Telescope can detect what's on a planet that far away in the first place. Researchers say that it'll be about a year until we can collect enough data to check these results. And you better bet I'm going to be following up. If you like optimistic science and tech stories, follow for more. The James Webb Telescope.
Two things. It was people who had anomalous UFO experiences, and it was people who had experienced Havana syndrome.
Diplomats and spies began to hear sounds and fall ill with a mysterious illness that people struggled to explain, what became known as Havana syndrome.
And in both cases, you have these kind of severe electromagnetic radiation effects, and often differences in the caudate nucleus and putamen, which is in the basal ganglia, the dorsal striatum of the brain, the scarring. But also the neuronal density of that area of the brain would cause somebody to even make sort of contact. Mm-hmm. But do we have any theories on kind of the electromagnetic radiation component?
I mean, certainly we were to look at it from like a relativistic perspective. Well, that sounds like visible band light being blue shifted into the ultraviolet, and you're getting literally a sunburn. Mm-hmm. And if you look at an October type thing where light's getting lensed around the crack, etc., stuff should be blue and red shifting. So things coming towards you would actually red shift spectrally, and the people getting like burns. Mm-hmm. So it's ultraviolet, it's like ionizing radiation. Mm-hmm. So that would be light being blue shifted into the ultraviolet as it's lensed across the bubble that the craft creates. And so we are seeing artifacts that seem to show that they're basically manipulating space-time.
And I guess that's why you get this sort of skipping across. space-time effect or something. It looks like the things are just, you're literally folding space-time, I guess, so you can get from point A to point B.
You're riding a wave, basically. You create a wave, and you're on top of the tsunami wave, and you're riding across space-time. And then, of course, there's the other thing is, it's like an Einstein-Rosenbridge thing. It's 2 points on a piece of paper, and you fold it, but the way they're jumping around and skipping is, if you're riding the wave, it looks like you're moving very rapidly and like punctuated kind of movements, because if think of an accordion, and the wave you're riding is the accordion. When you flatten out the accordion, like flat space-time, you would smoothly move across. But I think we're stuck with, like, Einstein stuff was amazing, and nobody's really. I mean, there's obviously people with string theory, Embre, all these other different physics theories, quantum gravity, other theories, but there hasn't been something that unified all the weak and strong force, etc. And that's an ongoing thing. And I think finding the Higgs boson is going to be the big answer.
Yeah,
we'll see.
So speaking of string theory, it feels like it just hasn't shipped a product. You have our best and brightest, often really smart people getting into this sort of field that maybe you can detect black holes with strings, but generally it's just not that useful.
Well, string theory, I mean, mathematically, I guess it works out, right? But like most of the stuff you can't empirically observe because the strings are so small and subatomically, there's just no way of.
It's 11 dimensions.
There's no way of verifying that. It's a nice. I'll call it like overlay, or is that maybe this is reality, maybe it's not. It mathematically works out.
I think it's force-fitting general relativity and quantum field theory. But this brings up an interesting question, which is, can we go down the tree trunk of physics and then find another branch?
Clearly, quantum physics, with nuclear and hydrogen bombs as its byproducts, was becoming dangerous.
It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe.
After the invention of these apocalyptic weapons, was true fundamental physics then concealed in deep black aerospace, while public-facing physics was sent into a cul-de-sac so it could do less damage? Were there actually updates in physics, maybe mid-century, that were not disclosed to the public? Okay, I realize this sounds kind of insane, but hear me out.
Imagine that this billiard ball is a proton.
The golden age of relativity was a wild, forgotten time in the history of American physics. This was a period in the 50s where the study of anti-gravity, yeah, you heard me right, anti-gravity, experienced a dramatic resurgence of interest, not just among quacks, among real physicists.
Since then, there has been a steady but constant improvement.
Roger Babson, a patron of science, was obsessed with finding the solution to anti-gravity. His Gravity Research Foundation held a popular essay contest which garnered contributions from many of the top minds at the time. Meanwhile, another industrialist, Agnew Bainson, started the Institute of Field Physics in North Carolina, also dedicated to the study of anti-gravity. His Chapel Hill conference in 1957 included top physicists like Bryce DeWitt, Richard Feynman, Peter Bergman, Freeman Dyson, and John Wheeler, all there to discuss the role of gravity in physics. As physicist Lewis Witten would go on to say about anti-gravity in the 50s, it was in the wind, meaning it was everywhere.
He said, "What are you doing about anti-gravity?" And I said, "Well, I'm not against gravity."
Witten actually worked in Martin Corporation's anti-gravity research unit. That's right, they had an anti-gravity research outfit. It was called Research Institute for Advanced Studies, or RIAS for short. And Martin Corporation, of course, would later become Lockheed Martin. Lewis Witten's direct boss at RIAS was a guy named George Trimble. In a 1956 article found in Jane's Defense Weekly, George Trimble said, "We're already working on nuclear fuels and equipment to cancel out gravity," and added that the conquest of gravity could be done in about the amount of time it took to build the first atom bomb. By the time the 60s had rolled around, most people had kind of forgotten about anti-gravity.
It quieted down because nobody ever got anywhere, or it quieted down because it did get somewhere and it went black.
Yeah, it is kind of weird where, as far as I know, from my kind of topological physics history knowledge, where there's all these anti-grav groups up until the early 60s, and then they, until they vaporized.
You know that there's physics knowledge held by aerospace companies that is not known.
There certainly is materials knowledge.
Material
which
science
involves topological physics or whatever.
It's hard to say whether anything real was discovered in the realm of anti-gravity or if it went black. But when aviation journalist Nick Cook tried to meet with the then long-retired 80-something-year-old George Trimble through a friend of his at Lockheed Martin, this was the message he received back. Quote unquote, "I don't know who this old man is or what he once was, but he told me in no uncertain terms to get off his case. He doesn't want to speak to me, and he doesn't want to speak to you. Not now, not ever. I don't mind telling you that he sounded scared." Did Deep Black Aerospace secretly make a huge breakthrough in anti-gravity? Well, when he worked for Martin in the 50s, Louis Witten specialized in nonlinear algebra and topological physics, the two things that you'd need to investigate gravity, and maybe how to beat it. He also did contract work on gravity for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
The reason there was a laboratory at Wright Field was to find out what we were doing and to help us do it. And I got a contract from Wright Field to do it, to do gravity, which I did very happily.
And who is Louis Witten's son? Ed Witten, just the most formidable proponent of string theory, maybe of all time.
Do you think that string theory, which Ed Witten worked on, is intentionally a bridge to nowhere?
I have privately said that string theory was a very odd development because it both allowed physics to proceed as if it was doing something new while breaking no new ground in the physical world in which we live. I don't really know. If you were trying to stagnate the field, string theory is pretty brilliant.
And remember that Chapel Hill conference that's thrown in 1957 by Agnew Bainson, who's obsessed with anti-gravity? Well, Louis Witten was there, and the conference helped establish quantum gravity, of which string theory is an offshoot. In an interview with the American Institute of Physics, when anti-gravity gets brought up, Louis Witten says, a guy named Townsend discovered that there was a type of bismuth that was repelled instead of attracting.
There was a vice president of the Martin Company who brought that up. He said, I read about a guy in Indiana who says the rock of bismuth that shows anti-gravity.
And where have we heard about bismuth with possible anti-gravity properties before? That's Gary Nolan, Stanford microbiologist and Nobel nominee, who claims to have UFO crash parts with isotope ratios that don't occur naturally on Earth. One of his pieces that we looked at together when I visited was magnesium bismuth.
Bismuth layers less than human hair, supposedly picked up in the crash retrieval of an advanced aerospace vehicle. Nowhere could we find any evidence that anybody ever made one of these.
And who's this Townsend guy Witten's referring to? Witten had to have been talking about Townsend Brown, one of the country's leading anti-gravity researchers at the time. Yeah, and there's a guy named Townsend Brown who had a theory that if you took two charged plates and then you put something neutral between them, the neutral thing would sort of gravitate a little towards the positively charged plate, and you could basically figure out anti-gravity. From the outside, Townsend Brown sort of looks like an amateurish mid-century physicist and failed inventor exploring the kooky world of anti-gravity just to end up failing and creating the intellectual property behind the Ionic Breeze air purifier. I'm not joking. But a great biography called The Man Who Mastered Gravity by Paul Shoskin tells the real story. He parachuted behind enemy lines into Germany in 1944 and started looking into the German UFO reverse engineering program.
That's crazy.
OSS and MI6 super spies Bill Donovan and William Stevenson needed the Allies' preeminent anti-gravity scientists to investigate the notorious Foo Fighter phenomenon. These were bizarre orbs that looked like intelligently controlled ball lightning popping up all over Germany in the early 40s and messing with Allied fighter pilots. I couldn't find a ton of corroboration outside of Shoskin's book on this story. But here's why I think it's true. We do know for a fact that Eisenhower sent General James Doolittle to investigate Swedish ghost rockets. These were tons of UFO sightings in Sweden and Finland in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Curiously, Doolittle then went back to the United States just to found the Lindbergh Foundation, which researched novel aviation propulsion methods. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if Townsend Brown was tasked with the same thing with Foo Fighters.
I mean, there's some other stuff, too, that I can't talk about that was way before that you're like, oh, shit.
But what did Brown's work in anti-gravity have to do with UFOs? Well, his gravitator looked exactly like a flying saucer.
He found that circular craft were better for that application than wing craft.
And behind closed doors, Townsend Brown was obsessed with UFOs. He even created NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. When Townsend's daughter, Linda Brown, and his biographer requested the scientist's records from the Navy, they were at first very uncooperative, and then eventually they hinted that a lot of Brown's work was still classified. But why would Brown's work be classified if he was just a failed hack?
The National Secrecy Act prevented scientists like T. Townsend Brown from commercializing or even publicizing any technology which could potentially be interpreted as having a military application.
Well, we know from Shotkin's biography that Brown actually had meetings with the highest level officials in American atomic programs. People like Edward Teller, the father of the